So for everyone in here, my name is Lucy. I'm a BSW student at FSU. I'll just be like the moderator, helper outer today. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Brittney Barros, and I am a current LLMSW macro practitioner. I got my BSW from Eastern Michigan University, and then I received my Master's of Social Work with a concentration in welfare of children and families from the University of Michigan. I'm also currently pursuing a second master's degree in public policy with a concentration in social policy. And I do have Hill experience. I know this is like the office hours portion of the event. I interned for Senator Gary C. Peters, the U.S. Senator for Michigan, one of them. And I also currently hold two roles. I currently work at the Michigan Supreme Court as a current youth champion for children in foster care. And then I also work with the Quality Improvement Center, which is funded by the Children's Bureau. Also, Dr. Angelique Day is very heavily involved in the project, where I get to be a young a youth and child engagement coordinator for young people in foster care. So yeah, that's a little bit about me, and I'm very happy and honored to be speaking with all of you guys.
That's awesome. It sounds like you're doing a lot of work that is related to what you're passionate about, which
Yeah,
is so
absolutely.
awesome to see. My first question for you is what was your path to getting to working on the Hill? Like, what got you there? What made you want to start working on the Hill?
Yeah, so I actually started as someone with lived expertise and experience in the foster care system. Starting at age 14, I knew I meant to be an advocate for other young people in foster care. So I really started my policy experience just working with different youth boards, different organizations about system level change for the young people in foster care. And I also I remember applying for this internship, which was through the Congressional Coalition on Adoption Institute, also known as CCAI. And they have a program where former current people with lived expertise can come and intern on the Hill. It's a dual internship where the first thing that one of the portions of the internship is you you intern for a member of Congress, and so and then the next portion you write a policy report on a specific issue in foster care that you're passionate about, and then you present it to the White House and members of Congress through a congressional briefing. So I applied for that internship, and I'm really blessed and privileged to say that I'm an alumni of the CCAI FYI internship program. And so once I got that, I packed my bags, moved to DC, and was interning for Senator Peters for about 2.5, 3 months, and it was a pleasurable experience. And yeah, so that's how a little bit about how I got onto the Hill was through that specialized program, the CCAI, that helps elevate youth voice through congressional internships and policy writing.
That's awesome. Was that internship uh, during your undergrad, your graduate?
Yeah, so that was in my undergraduate experience. So that was in my undergraduate experience as a BSW at Eastern Michigan University. And it was in the summer between, I believe, my sophomore and junior year, or my sophomore and junior year in undergrad. So it was interesting, being about like 19, 20 years old, being excited to be on the Hill, and yeah, so it was very fun, and it was definitely a culture shock for me because I come from Michigan, where it's not like the hustle and bustle of Washington D.C. So yeah, it was definitely a culture shock, but a culture shock that I needed to you know um, ground myself in the different workspaces that I can come across. So yeah, so that's how I got into it. It was during my sophomore slash junior year of undergrad.
Awesome. Do you have any advice that you would give new professionals who are looking at applying to internships or jobs, like similar to the things that you've had experience with on the Hill?
So absolutely. So the first big piece of advice that I would love to give you all is that it's not about who you know, it's about what you know, or it's not about what you know, it's about who you know. And then I'm going to take that a step further. It's about who knows you, right? So making sure that you're networking with people, even if it's reaching out for an email to ask for like a coffee date or a Zoom session, and continuously going to these type of events for that networking opportunity. In fact, I was brought to this Congressional Research Institute on Social Work and Policy through a mentor of mine, Dr. Angelique Day, who's listening on this call, and I met with Dr. Charles, and who's the CEO and director of this organization. And because of that networking ability that I had with Dr. Angelique and Dr. Charles, I was able to come and speak my experiences on the Hill. So making sure that people know you and making sure like you give people opportunity to notice you. So when you're applying for different internships on the Hill, after your interview, always send up a follow-up thank you. And it can be short and sweet. It doesn't have to be like super long. But just I notice like a lot of jobs that I get now currently, like they say, Brittany, the one thing I appreciate about you is you sent that thank you follow-up, whereas none of the other candidates did. So that really stood out to them. And basically in that email, you want to show appreciation for the interview and how that's gonna you know gear you towards your success in your future endeavors, and maybe even copying, like you can also find my LinkedIn here or my CV here or my portfolio here, to show like extra your extra competencies and skill sets and work uh, experience. And then I would also say not only like about what you know, who you know, and who knows you, but it's also about making sure that you have good people to support you through your application process. That is a big step that I had. Like all my mentors, my support networks, my community, making sure that I had quality letters of recommendations, making sure that I had, for example, I would have in high school when I was applying to colleges, I would have my English teacher look over my applications. Or when I was in undergrad, I would have my writing professors look over my applications for grad school. Making sure that I'm, linked into the writing professionals that are out there that can help you with these application processes, because they're very competitive. And I was actually told for the internship that I applied for on the Hill, they were looking purposely for any mistake that they can find. So like, for example, if they have instructions like please send your resume in a PDF file with Barros/B/the date, make sure you follow those detailed instructions, because a lot of interviewers and a lot of people looking for the candidates, they're going to look for to see who pays attention to those details. So make sure you follow all the instructions as clearly as possible in the application process, and make sure like you always ask questions. If you don't know if you don't know something about an application process, make sure that you're sending those questions. That also shows your eagerness and your excitement for the position or the opportunity. So yeah, I would say those are my three best advices. Is it's about who you know, what you know, and who knows you. It's about being able to follow directions on an application, and making sure like you're listening to the fine print and the details. And then the third, like I said, to wrap it up, the third piece of advice is to make sure you lean on your community support, mentors, your friends, the people that know you best to help you with the application process. Make sure, and back to networking, like so you never know, someday one of the people that you network at this event here, like they could write your letter of recommendation, because they'll see the bright and the light and the energy in you, and they'll see what you bring to the table, and you'll be able to get those fine letters of recommendations for powerful positions such as being on the Hill.
Thank you. I think you bring up a really good point with those small details. It's really easy for us to be like, well, I feel like it doesn't really matter. But you're saying like it does matter, and they're looking at that. So thank you for that.
Absolutely.
Are there? Oh, yeah.
Oh, Brittany, you've been very humble in your presentation. I know Brittany well, but Brittany actually started in the policy space as a high school student. When I worked for Michigan's Children, she was one of the brave high schoolers who was not afraid to tell her story to a whole bunch of state policymakers. And, Brittany, you became known in the field even before you started college. And I think one of the things I can tell you as an academic is I think Brittany has done a lot of things that you can't even see on her resume because she didn't think it was important enough to write it down. And so every time you engage in this kind of opportunity or do public speaking events or participate in state or national level conferences, make sure you put that on your resume because that helps tell your story of who you are, who you're connected to. Brittany is a master at that.
Yeah, and I will say, oh, sorry, Dr. Angelique, just to add on to that, even if, like, for example, sometimes, federal positions and government positions want, like, all 10 years of your experience, but if you go into the private sector, they only want one clean-cut page. So make sure you keep a master resume of, like, everything you have done, and then depending on the job, the type of work that you'll be doing, you'll be able to tailor that specific resume going to that specific job. So you have the best opportunity to, get the position. And so like Dr. Angelique said, like always, keep an online or Google Doc or a Microsoft Word doc of like your full resume, and then being able to have the skill set and the experience to be able to tailor it based on the position you're applying for. Again, federal positions, they ask for like, I want to see your last 10 years, but private sector, like they'll ask for like one page clean cut. Like sometimes they even limit how many words and sentences are in a resume. It just depends on the job that you take up.
Awesome. Thank you for, being so involved from such a young age. I think that can be really inspiring for people to see that that's something that is possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And, as part of the networking, like I'm happy to, be a part of your guys' network. We're social workers, we're in this together, and, it takes a village to raise a profession, I would say. So making sure that we all stay connected and we stay, just linked in, because like, you never know who you're going to see out in the field of social work, especially in policy. There's a lot of great policy advocates and, not just me, but other professionals that with an MSW or a BSW that work on the Hill. I know quite a few of them. And so social work, I think, is gaining momentum in Congress. Specifically not just the federal, but like, for example, in state legislator, Michigan state legislation, we just proclamated March as Social Work Appreciation Month. So congressional members, they know what social work is, and a lot of them are including them into their office spaces, specifically around policy issues like child welfare, transportation, public health. So there are a lot of opportunities to advance on the Hill with a social work degree.
You've mentioned a lot of really helpful skills for anyone who's interested in going into either internship or job position that you have, like the areas that you have experience in on the Hill. Are there any other skills that you would think would be helpful when considering a job on the Hill?
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely some skills that I think would be very preferable while being on the Hill includes having clear verbal and written communication. Especially in a policy position, you want to be able to write succinctly. You want to be able to sometimes, like I remember being on the Hill and my boss, the senator, would ask me, Brittany, there's hundreds of pages. Can you read this and sum it up in like a paragraph? So being able to, succinctly and, condensedly being able to write is very important. And also having strong verbal skills. You're talking to constituents. You're talking to the members of the community, members of, the state that the congresswoman or man or non-binary represents. So making sure like your verbal and your written communication skills are on the par. Also, dressing professionally is very important on the Hill. Like I remember hearing stories of interns getting sent home because they did not wear the proper clothing material to the office. So being able to, come at your best every day on the Hill that you work. So it's all business professional business attire. And it's funny. I remember making a joke in the office, like on Fridays we wear business casual, but that's as like when it comes to dressing down, business casual is the lowest is what you're gonna get. So I'm making sure like and here's another thing. I know no you wouldn't expect these tips or tricks, but one thing that helped me on the Hill was always having mints, always having one of those erase markers for your clothes, because I would spill coffee all over myself and like have to meet with constituents with like coffee spill. So I used to have like the stain erase marker, making sure that you have a snack, because through when you're meeting with constituents, writing policy memos, when you're giving tours of the Capitol, you're gonna get hungry. So making sure you pack a well balanced lunch, and then also pack like a couple snacks throughout the day. So just those little things too help prepare me for success. And then other skills. Sorry, I know I just gave little minor tips and tricks, but also other skills I would say is being policy knowledgeable and aware of what's going on currently, and knowing your history. You don't have to be like a government guru, but I remember in my interview them asking me, so how many senators do you think there are? How many House of Representatives do you think there are? And so making sure like the basic components of government structure is very important as well. And so making sure that you know your a little bit of history, being able to give that background and that knowledge and show your skills, that you have different competencies within government structures and skill sets. And then finally, I would say just being open and honest and vulnerable. And I know no Hill staffer would probably tell you this but me, but like, I got my position on the Hill when I was very honest. Like I told them, like, I came from foster care. And one powerful quote that I will never forget that someone told me is 20% of people make decisions for 100% of the community. And so I wanted to be part of that 20% of people to help make a difference in this world through policy evolution and policy systemic changes. And I told my interviewer for the Hill that, I was in foster care, and, here's what I've done in my advocacy work to better the lives of young people in foster care. And here's where my skill sets and tools are that would be beneficial to your office. So being honest, open, and aware. I mean, obviously you don't have to trauma dump on everyone, but, sticking to your core, expertise and sticking to your core authentic self, is very important, because, I always tell people, whether it's on the Hill or off the Hill, you want to be in a position at your job where you can be your authentic self. And I'm very grateful that Senator Gary C. Peters' office let me be my authentic self. It wasn't like a cutthroat culture. I was able to, make jokes in the office, have fun, and I'm a really goofy person, and it wasn't, they provided me a structure and a work environment where I was able to, generally be my best self. And so, like I said, making sure, in the interview, like you're open and honest. Again, maybe not trauma dump, but, just being your authentic self, because honestly, you wouldn't want a position that wouldn't allow you to be your authentic self anyways. So that's a couple of my advices is, like I said, being authentic and, engagement into your true identity, making sure that you, the little things such as mints, the dry eraser, the stain remover, eating a well-balanced meal, and then having verbal and written communication skills are very important.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And you also have already mentioned some of the ways in which you've used your skills as a social worker to serve you in your time on the Hill. Could you elaborate a little bit more on how you use like your values and our like code of ethics as social workers, and how you use that to guide your work on the Hill?
Yeah, absolutely. So I generally believe like one of the most important soft skills to have as a young person, as a social worker on the Hill, is definitely being able to relate and meet people where they're at. And having an empathetic tone and voice and body language when you're speaking to constituents is also very a vital skill to have. So, for example, even if a constituent comes into your office and tells you, "Oh, I don't agree with anything the senator's saying," you can start off by saying, "I hear you, I empathize with you," but also sticking core to your boss's beliefs, right? So, making sure like you're very transparent with your stance. The one thing I loved about other congressional colleagues of mine is when I shadowed them before I started the position, is making sure that they are empathetic, they're aware of what disagreements or political discourse that can happen, but at the same time standing firm, like this is the senator's response, and and always thanking them for the time to meet, regardless of their own political views. And yeah, absolutely. So, oh, and I'm just reading the chat real quick. Yes, mints, not gum. Huge tip. I feel that same experience. Yeah, and thank you for these tips. I'm thinking about applying for summer internship with my House rep. Yes, like we need more social workers in Congress. Like even if it's an internship, if you're a legislative consultant, if you're a legislative analysis, all the way up to the chief of staff, like we need social workers. And I was so pleasured, to meet other social workers on the Hill, and being able to network and connect with them, and making sure we stay core to our values. And like the question was, how do we use the code of ethics? Is always understanding the dignity and the worth of the person. Like they may not agree with you politically, like especially constituents that come into the office like really angry and upset about the way a senator, your boss voted, or the way your boss made his remarks on a public television news media. Just meeting them where they're at, and like I said, but still standing firm into your beliefs. And then I would say other code of ethics that I've used is definitely confidentiality. So a lot of the meetings that I've been in were extremely confidential. And so, for example, like different congressional hearings, different congressional briefings, different meetings you'll have with constituents, people are going to tell you their honest and open, vulnerable stories, especially from grassroots organizations. They're going to tell you like some really personal experiences, especially from a constituent's voice. Like there's a lot of lobbyists and people that come and visit the Senate. They use like authentic voice of people that have been affected by a certain policy area. So definitely like having that level of understanding. And then also finally that another skill I use is my social justice lens. I was always, confidential about people's stories. I also came with a social justice agenda. I'm going to be straightforward. And, some of the amazing opportunities that I've had, I want to share with you guys. I actually wrote a congressional report on sibling separation in foster care. And this report was presented to the White House. So I presented it to the White House at the Trump administration, and then I presented it to members of Congress. I testified before them about my policy report. And my policy report actually was able to get legislation introduced in the House that I wrote, like the bill that I wrote, like I'm not even joking, the House of Representatives literally copied and pasted from my policy report into the bill, into the piece of legislation. And I was able to get a bill introduced called the Protecting Sibling Relationships in Foster Care Act, which was written by me and by House of Representative Don Bacon. And to say that, I wrote a bill at age 21, that got introduced into Congress, like that was because of the network, the skills, the resources, and And I also think, I'm very privileged and fortunate. Like, I mean, yeah, I'm a Latina woman, but like at the same, that's experienced homelessness and foster care and, a lot of trials and tribulations, but having those resources and networks, it's a privilege. And you want to use your privilege to advance society and raise hope and change the world as future congressional social workers.
That's awesome. I think that I see in the chat, it's really inspiring to hear that, you say you stay true to yourself and your core beliefs, but you work hard and you're able to do something that is so impactful.
Yeah, and also I don't mean to like switch the other side, but staying core to your beliefs, but have an open mind too. Like you're gonna get so many policy recommendations and thoughts and beliefs and different values and stakeholders that come to the table on different areas of priority legislation, and you want to keep an open mind. Like you might think, oh my gosh, I'm never gonna bring this constituents to my boss. There's no, but then the constituents. But if you have that open mind of like, this constituent's voice needs to be heard. This constituent's voice is part of, Senator, for example, Senator Peters' location. Like, you got to keep an open mind. And so when you go into these meetings as a congressional, staffer, like you have to go in with an open mind. Like, yeah, stand true to your beliefs, but don't stand into them so firmly that you can't, respect or, have respectable dialogue and a restorative justice conversation around other people's policy beliefs as well.
Yeah. And I definitely agree. I think that's something that in our political environment, especially, people forget, just which I think is falls pretty true to our social work code of ethics, is that we believe the dignity and worth of every person, no matter if we agree with them or not. So they're worth a respectful conversation.
Absolutely. And this world has, yesterday I went to an event with Governor Gretchen Whitmer, who's the governor of Michigan, and CNN anchor Chris Wallace. And we were talking about in our dialogue, the polarization of, it's, the left, and I'm going to be straightforward. I'm very left. I'm a socialist, go Bernie girl. Like, I believe in social welfare programs. I believe in, helping Black, Indigenous, and Latino women of color. I believe in LGBTQ rights, and I'm very left, and I keep that very, I stick to my values of like, hey, I am a left-leaning person. And at the same time, how do I navigate skillfully to talk to the right, to convince them on why my policy priority is important? And that's another skill that you want to have on the Hill. Just because you disagree with someone doesn't mean, it gives you the ultimate right to disregard them. And I understand, like, a lot of policies disregard marginalized groups of people, and I hear that, and I honor that, and but when it comes to, like, for example, the bill that I got introduced into Congress that, offers $10 million in grants to sibling separation the agencies that do good at keeping siblings together, like, that was introduced by a Republican congressman. And, like, I never thought, like, before my congressional internship, I used to be very dismissive. Like, I will never talk to a Republican. I will never converse with those Republicans. But that's not how I am now. I've grown and matured to be able to have respectful dialogue and conversation and community building to find that common ground, right? And like I said, like, I'm also a no BS person. If you say something super racist, I'm a call that in too. And I'm very careful about saying calling out. I say calling in, like, that's problematic, and also making sure when you're talking to people in the political schema is like, if they say something problematic or wrong or there's the veil of ignorance, like, always, ask them, challenge them in a respectful way. Like, hey, like, what you said was problematic. Let's think about it in a different way. Or, I don't think that aligns with what that person was trying to say. Did you really mean this? And so, like I said, to conclude my long spieling answer is like, yes, I've had a lot of, as a leftist myself, as someone that believes in social justice, the rights of all people, regardless of race, background, religion, sex, etc., gender identity, experiences. I used to think to myself, like, wow, like I would never be able to talk to a Republican. And then I had a Republican introduce my bill because I was able to have those respectful conversations and create that dialogue and create a sense of common ground of where can we meet. And that's the thing, like a lot of people on the right are also very dismissive. Like, I see crybaby snowflake liberals, and I see the left, doing different things to, and that's the thing. Like, that's creating and perpetuating violence. You know what I mean? Like the polarization. If you think about, like, for example, like, what happened to Nancy Pelosi's husband? I'm getting super political here. I'm so sorry. What happened to Nancy Pelosi's husband, and what happened to Governor Gretchen Whitmer and the January 6th resurrection riot? Like, rhetoric of polarization is actually very harmful to our community. So, yeah, and a lot of people will say from the right or left, well, that sounds like a centrist view. No, it sounds like a morally, ethically encompassed view because, yes, I'm a social justice advocate and warrior for all people. I have to be able to have honest and vulnerable conversations with people that don't agree with me. Because if we can't have these conversations, things like the January 6th Capitol riot and, the kidnapping of Nancy Pelosi's husband or the kidnapping plot against Governor Richmond, that stuff is going to continue. And, I don't condone violence of, the political side, the over polarized and area of, being so polarized to the point where you can't even have a conversation. So that's another skill. Sorry for my rant, but being able to have honest conversations with people that you don't agree with. So to wrap that up, is just say be comfortable with being uncomfortable. Like, people are gonna say things to you on the Hill that you totally disagree with, and you think, wow, how did they even come up with? But be able to sit in that uncomfortable space as well.
Yeah. I think my next question kind of ties into what you just said. Is there's going to be moments, as like I'm sure a lot of us can recognize, in these settings where we're confronted with these things that are very contrary to our personal beliefs, our profession's beliefs and morals. Can you elaborate a little bit more on how to navigate that, and even still while still upholding like our profession?
Absolutely, yeah. So, like I said, just sticking to your true, authentic self, but also being able to challenge people on some of their views, and you don't have to do it in a disrespectful way. There's this thing that I like. I learned from I'm also a master's of public policy student, but you know, instead of calling, people out, calling people in, like, hey, what I heard, I don't think you mean it that way, but this is what I'm hearing from you. And, it makes people think when you're able to reflect and kind of use some of that motivational interviewing skills you learn in social work school. When you're able to use reflexive questions, it gets people to think like, wow, like I never thought about it that way. And don't get me wrong, you'll encounter, people that are, not open to that. But, the hope in our society and to bring social justice into this world is to have open souls and open hearts and open minds. That's what, social work is, right? And so making sure you're using your reflexive motivational interviewing skills, making sure that you come from an empathetic lens and saying, I hear you, but here's what's really going on, making sure that you're knowledgeable and competent, and also honestly admitting when you don't know something. So, instead of making up like a random statistic that came out of your brain that's not even real, like when you're talking to constituents, it's okay to say, you know what, I don't know much about that subject, but I'm going to look into it and I'm going to do my further research. Because trust me, it's not just, the hot button topics like abortion or voting rights or LGBTQ rights. Like you'll get policy conversations that have to do with like the railroads or like or like electricity. And so, you know, sometimes you might not be knowledgeable in like, let's say like the expansion of solar panels and climate change, but making sure like, you know, you're able to do your research. And that's another skill to have, is being able to do your research on these different policy topics. Because like you said, you can't go onto the Hill thinking you know it all, because I promise you, you don't. There's hundreds of bills being introduced almost every day that have different policy topics. So just keeping an open mind, using your reflexive questions, using your motivational interviewing, making sure you're coming from an empathetic lens, but also sticking to your core values. And then finally, being able to do your own research and your own critical thinking. That's another skill. Critical thinking is a huge skill to have on the Hill. Like, how does this policy impact people? How does this policy, you know, put an increase or decrease in the fiscal year budget? How does this policy affect LGBTQ folks, folks of color, women, non-binary folks? How does this policy affect, you know, people in poverty? Making sure like you're looking at it from a dynamic lens of like, you know, this is how this policy affects multiple people and various groups, and you know, making sure like you're able to do your own critical thinking on that as well.
Thank you. As we're coming towards the end of our time, I did want to open up and see if anyone else in the chat wants to pop on the screen, had any questions for Brittany. Give a little time in case anyone's typing. While people might possibly be typing, I will just ask a question of my own intrigue. Very informative. Thank you. Yes, it has been very informative. Something I was curious about is, you know, I'm in Florida. And something I have a lot of trouble with is a lot of our representatives don't hear us, don't listen to us. Even if I'm having a face-to-face conversation with them, I can tell that they're not hearing me. Do you have a time when something you were advocating for didn't work out or ended up being, it felt like your efforts were like ineffective? And like, if you had an experience like that, how did you work through that?
Yeah. So, for example, my effort, you know, the bill that I got introduced in Congress, keyword introduced, it hasn't been passed yet. You know, it hasn't even moved to committee yet. So, you know, I feel sometimes like, honestly, heart to heart with y'all, I felt like I failed a lot of young people in foster care by not being able to get this bill, like, you know, passed. I mean, it's still able to get passed because it was introduced this year. But I felt like there was so many things on my plate of like, okay, working for the Michigan Supreme Court, working for the federal government, going to school as a dual master's student and 2 different master's degrees at U of M. Yeah, I absolutely felt like sometimes, like, you know, I could have put more pressure on my congressional member to pass and, you know, get more signatures and co-sponsors on the bill. And, you know, I reflect on that experience all the time of like, what could I have done? But it's not about what could have you done. It's also about what can you do in the future. So mobilization is important. As social workers, we need to mobilize collectively as a collective to be able to, you know, vote, making sure we're contacting our representatives. And let me tell you, I know a lot of people think like, oh, contacting your representative, that's you know, that's not impactful. But when you have 700,000 the same emails from different constituents saying the same thing, that's going to put a heavy, you know, consideration on the senator's shoulders. So making sure, like, you know, in your advocacy work, making sure you're mobilizing you know, making sure you're mobilizing people that, share the same core values and beliefs in social justice as you. I'm not sure if have you guys ever heard of the Payments for Placements initiative, but Payments for Placement was started by my best friend at the University of Michigan. And, now it's a mobilized effort that's all across the country. And it's just funny. I laugh with my old friend, my dear friend and colleague, Matt Dargay, like, you started this, dude. Like, you started a chapter of 5 people at University of Michigan. And now there's like dozens and dozens of P4P payments replacements chapters um, around the country. And so using those mobilization skills and getting, because there is power in numbers, and that's 100% true. So making sure we're capitalizing on those numbers as social workers, making sure that you stay connected to each other. Like I would honestly dare you guys to put your emails in the chat. Like, here, I'll put my email in the chat right now. Stay connected with, people that are like-minded souls, so anyone can reach out to my email. And I've gotten a couple LinkedIn requests from this. So, making sure that we stay connected, because, we are a collective effort in the name of social justice.
My school, me and my friend just started our P4P chapter at FSU.
Yes, that's amazing.
Ooh. Well, yeah, I'll put my school email in there. This is a great networking opportunity. Thank you so much, Brittany, for sharing your experiences with us. I know I learned a lot. But yeah, everyone continue to network. And
let me just say this.
Yeah.
You will never know. Like, there's been so many opportunities. Like, guys, I've spoken on Disney Channel. I've traveled to Japan to talk to their federal government. I have a whole documentary out there about my life. And honestly, it was because of the networks and the supports and the people I was able to drive together to fight for a common cause. Like, you want to keep your people close. You want to keep those that are, they say keep your enemies closer. I think that's baloney. You want to keep the people that are going to support you close as possible to you as possible, because you never know what type of opportunities are going to come your way. Like, I have people all the time in my networks, Brittany, you should apply for this job. And, sometimes, and that's another lesson that we have to learn as social workers, is sometimes, you'll be so blessed with so many opportunities, you'll have to say no. And that's another hard thing that I'm learning as a social worker, is like learning how to say no. Even if it's, an interest of mine or a passion of mine, you have to remember, like, you might not have capacity for it. You might be a full-time student, with or a single mom with 3 kids, or, working 2 full-time jobs, and making sure, like, it's not about the quantity of the work that you do, especially on the Hill. It's about the quality of work. They really look for the quality of the work, and rather than how many, quantitative things that you can do, they want to see, like, good effort and competencies and skill sets and raw talent. So making sure you're tapping into that, and tapping into, like I said, your networks, to be able to, have good letters of recommendations, to be able to, be known in the community, and being able to be a social justice advocate for people that, need people that we all come into social work because we have an experience, right? And like I shared, before, like, I came into social work because I was in foster care, and I had a really unethical social worker that, she was the one that, inspired me to become a social worker, because that was the social worker I needed that I never got to have. So we all come in with a story. So being open and honest with your stories, and, we need people like you guys in this field, especially, with lived experience with, homelessness, being a Black and brown woman, being LGBTQ, experiencing, violence. Like, we need people with real experiences to come into this field, and it doesn't have to always be traumatic, but, we've all been touched by a social worker in our lives, rather that's a professor, rather that's a personal social worker, rather that's, a social worker we've had. So making sure you're coming with your open and honest and vulnerability, and making sure that, you stick to your true self, and making sure that, you network with the people around you, because I promise you guys, sometimes I feel like I just got lucky and blessed, but it was because of the networks and, keeping in contact with people. And if anyone wants to be Facebook friends or LinkedIn friends, you can look me up. I'm going to type my name in the chat. I already got a few LinkedIn requests, but just, I would love to stay connected, because like we're in this fight together. And like I said, you're going to see people on the Hill that do not agree with you, and that's okay. I mean, it's not okay that some of their views can be oppressing to other people, but how do we challenge them in a way to make sense of their views of oppression and systematic barriers, rather than just shutting people out and them never being able to have an open heart or open mind.
Thank you. You'll definitely be getting an email from me.
Yes.
But thank you again, Brittany. And
of course, Lucy.
I think it is about that time to start filtering back to the main stage for our closing things and funness. But yeah, thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. I look forward to connecting in the future.